Imagine this! It's Christmas time in Victorian England. The streets are adorned with twinkling lights and the air is filled with the scent of roasted chestnuts. Families gather in their homes, the warmth of the fireplace contrasting with the cold, frosty air outside. It's a time of joy, celebration and togetherness, but there's something else in the air, something that sends a shiver down your spine. Amidst the laughter and merriment, there's an undercurrent of eerie tales and ghostly whispers. People are gathered around crackling fires, looking out frosty windows and telling spooky stories. These stories are not just any tales, they are ghost stories, filled with spectres and phantoms that haunt the imagination. The flickering flames cast long shadows on the walls, and the howling wind outside adds to the eerie atmosphere. It's a tradition that seems out of place in the festive season, yet it is deeply ingrained in the Victorian Christmas experience. It seems strange, right? Christmas is about joy and celebration, while ghost stories give you chills. But for the Victorians, these tales were an essential part of the holiday. They believed that the long, dark nights of winter were the perfect time to share stories of the supernatural. The contrast between the warmth of the hearth and the cold, dark world outside made the stories even more thrilling. Families would gather, and as the night grew darker, the stories grew more chilling. But for the Victorians, these spooky tales were as much a part of Christmas as presents and carols. The tradition of telling ghost stories during Christmas dates back to ancient times, but it was during the Victorian era that it truly flourished. Authors like Charles Dickens popularized the genre with works such as A Christmas Carol, which, despite its festive setting, is filled with ghosts and supernatural elements. These stories served as a reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead, especially during the darkest time of the year. They weren't just for fun, though. These stories reflected what the Victorians believed, what scared them, and what it meant to be alive and dead back then. The ghost stories often carried moral lessons, warning of the consequences of greed, selfishness, and other vices. They were a way for people to confront their fears and reflect on their lives. In a time when death was a constant presence, these tales provided a way to explore the unknown and find meaning in the face of mortality. So, next time you gather around the fire during the holiday season, remember the Victorian tradition of ghost stories, and let a ghostly chill add to the warmth of Christmas. Victorians were really into ghosts and spirits. The 19th century was a time of great change and uncertainty, and people were looking for ways to make sense of the world around them. This led to a widespread interest in the supernatural and the unseen. Ghost stories became a popular form of entertainment, and many people believed in the existence of spirits and otherworldly beings. The Victorians were fascinated by the idea that there might be more to life than what we can see and touch. They even held séances to talk to the dead. Séances were gatherings where people would attempt to communicate with spirits through a medium. These events were often held in darkened rooms, with participants sitting around a table and holding hands. The medium would enter a trance-like state and relay messages from the spirit world. Many people attended these séances in the hope of contacting deceased loved ones or gaining insight into the afterlife. The practice of holding séances became so popular that it even attracted the attention of famous figures of the time, including writers, scientists, and politicians. This fascination came from different places. One major influence was the rise of spiritualism, a religious movement that emerged in the mid-19th century. Spiritualists believed that it was possible to communicate with the spirits of the dead, and they held public demonstrations to prove their claims. These events drew large crowds and generated a great deal of interest in the supernatural. Spiritualism offered people a sense of comfort and hope, as it suggested that death was not the end, but rather a transition to another form of existence. One reason was spiritualism, a belief that we could talk to spirits. Spiritualism gained a significant following during the Victorian era, with many people attending séances and other events to witness the supposed communication with the dead. The movement was particularly appealing to those who had lost loved ones and were seeking solace in the idea that they could still connect with them. Spiritualist mediums claimed to have the ability to contact spirits and relay their messages to the living, and their performances often left audiences in awe. Strangely, science also played a part. The Victorian era was a time of rapid scientific advancement, with new discoveries being made in fields such as physics, chemistry, and biology. These advancements led to a growing curiosity about the natural world and the mysteries of life and death. Some scientists began to explore the possibility of an unseen world, conducting experiments to investigate phenomena such as telepathy, clairvoyance, and other psychic abilities. This intersection of science and the supernatural further fueled the Victorian fascination with the unseen. As scientists made new discoveries, people looked for explanations about the mysteries of life and death. The quest for knowledge and understanding led many to explore the boundaries between the known and the unknown. This period saw the emergence of new scientific disciplines such as psychology and parapsychology, which sought to explain the workings of the human mind and the nature of paranormal phenomena. The Victorians were eager to uncover the secrets of the universe, and their curiosity extended to the realms of the supernatural and the unseen. This was also a time when spooky stories were super popular. Ghost stories and tales of the supernatural were a favorite pastime for many Victorians. These stories were often shared around the fireplace or read aloud during gatherings, creating an atmosphere of suspense and intrigue. The popularity of ghost stories was reflected in the literature of the time, with many authors writing about haunted houses, spectral apparitions, and other eerie phenomena. These stories not only entertained but also tapped into the deep-seated fears and anxieties of the Victorian psyche. Authors like Edgar Allan Poe and Bram Stoker, who wrote scary stories that explored the dark side of our minds and the things we don't understand. Edgar Allan Poe's tales of horror and madness, such as The Telltale Heart and The Fall of the House of Usher, delved into the psychological depths of the human mind. Bram Stoker's Dracula introduced readers to the terrifying world of vampires and the unknown. These authors and their works left a lasting impact on the literary world and continue to be celebrated for their contributions to the genre of horror and the supernatural. The Victorian fascination with the unseen was a complex and multifaceted phenomenon, driven by a combination of cultural, scientific, and literary influences. Charles Dickens, a famous Victorian author, loved a good ghost story, especially at Christmas. His book is a classic. You know, the one with Ebenezer Scrooge and the ghosts? Dickens used ghost stories not just to entertain, but to teach lessons about kindness and generosity, especially during Christmas. Victorian Christmas ghost stories weren't just for fun. They often taught lessons about being greedy, selfish, or mean. The ghosts in these stories were like symbols of guilt, regret, and broken promises. These stories also showed the difference between the rich and poor in Victorian England and reminded people to be kind to each other, especially during Christmas. Sadly, these spooky Christmas stories became less popular in the 1900s. World War I made scary stories seem less important. Plus, people found new entertainment like movies and radio. As science advanced, fewer people believed in ghosts. The ghost stories started to feel old-fashioned. Even though Victorian Christmas ghost stories aren't as popular anymore, they left behind some cool things. The images they created, snowy landscapes, flickering lights, and creepy old houses, are still part of how we imagine Christmas today. The stories also taught us about being kind, forgiving others, and the importance of friendship, things that are still important today. You can still see the influence of Victorian Christmas ghost stories today. Movies like, and our modern versions of Dickens' story. Even TV shows have Christmas episodes with ghosts, showing that we still enjoy a little spooky fun during the holidays. Why do we still love ghost stories, especially at Christmas? Maybe it's because they make us think about the mysteries of life and death. They give us a thrill and let us forget our worries for a while. Plus, they can teach us about ourselves and how we treat others. Victorian Christmas ghost stories remind us that Christmas isn't just about parties and presents. It's also a time to think about our fears, the unknown, and how to be better people. These stories, with their mix of spooky and heartwarming moments, show us that even when things are tough, there's always hope. Even though the Victorian era is over, we can still enjoy their ghost stories. These tales, often filled with suspense and mystery, were a staple of Victorian entertainment. Families would gather around the fireplace, the flickering flames casting eerie shadows on the walls as they listened to stories that sent shivers down their spines. The tradition of storytelling was not just about the thrill of the tale, but also about bringing people together, creating a shared experience that transcended generations. Get cozy with your family and friends, turn off the lights and share a spooky tale. Imagine the scene. The room is dimly lit, the only light coming from a few flickering candles. The air is filled with anticipation as everyone settles in, ready to be transported to another world. The storyteller begins, their voice low and steady, drawing everyone in. As the story unfolds, you can feel the tension in the room, the collective gasp at a particularly scary moment, the laughter that follows a clever twist. It's a magical experience, one that connects us to the past and to each other. You might be surprised how much fun it is. There's something special about sharing a story, about the way it brings people together. It's not just about the scare, but about the shared experience, the way it makes us feel connected. In a world where we're often so disconnected, taking the time to sit down and share a story can be a powerful way to reconnect. And who knows, you might even discover a new favorite tale, one that you'll want to share again and again. Remember, a good ghost story never gets old. These tales have been passed down through generations, each storyteller adding their own twist, their own flair. They remind us of the power of imagination, of the way a well-told story can transport us to another time and place. And while the world has changed in many ways since the Victorian era, the magic of a good story remains the same. So gather your loved ones, turn off the lights, and let yourself be carried away by the tale. So as you listen to these Victorian tales, remember they're more than just scary stories. They're a window into the past, a way to connect with those who came before us. Each story is a piece of history, a glimpse into the lives and imaginations of the people who lived in a different time. And while the details of the stories may change, the themes remain the same: love, loss, fear, hope. These are the things that make us human, that connect us across time and space. They give us a glimpse into the past, teach us about being human, and remind us of how powerful stories can be. So the next time you gather with your family and friends, take a moment to share a story. It doesn't have to be a ghost story, but let it be something that brings you together, that sparks your imagination, that reminds you of the power of a well-told tale. Because in the end, it's not just about the story itself, but about the connections we make through it, and that's a tradition worth keeping alive.